Don't you understand even yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves and the baskets left over you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loaves and the large basket, the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees? The thing I want to draw from this is that the disciples could not understand the code language that Jesus was talking about. He says in chapter number 16, verse 5, he said, later at the crossing to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered that they had forgotten to bring any bread. Watch out. And Jesus warned them, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, they misunderstood the code language that Jesus was communicating to them. That oftentimes Jesus was talk in figurative language. In the construct of language, there is the literal meaning, which is literally mean this, and then there's the figurative meaning, which means there's a secondary meaning that can be applied to, that the meaning of what is being said is not obvious. It's beneath it. And so Jesus was saying to them, he said, I'm not talking about beware of the leaven of actual bread, but he was referring to the idea of the Pharisees who have yeast. He said, beware of the yeast, the ability of the Pharisees to contaminate and to bring a wedge between and distort what I'm trying to teach. He said, beware that. He said to them, you miss my code language. In verse number 8, Jesus said to them, you have little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? He was saying to them, I had capacity to give bread. And then Jesus stated his case. He said, do you remember I fed 5,000 with 5 loaves? And then I had baskets left over that you picked up. He said, remember I had 4,000 with 7 baskets, a large that you picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? He's speaking in codes to his disciples. I'm not talking. So again, I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, this is very important that we understand this, that Jesus often says to his disciples, be aware, be on alert. Be on alert. There are people who have disguised themselves, who attempt to distort, to discredit, and hinder the advancement of the kingdom of God. It was then, and is now. Then, at that time, there were those who wanted to discredit, who chose to distort and hinder people from being a part of the message of Christ or receiving the message of Christ, and transformation occurs. It happened then and it's happening now. People are turning away from the truth. They're turning away from God. And they're being turned away from God because of the spirit of the Pharisees and the Sadducees upon the land. Now, then at last, verse 12, they understood that he wasn't speaking about yeast in bread, but about the deceptive teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. That's what he was saying. He now speaks in code, and they now understand what he was trying to communicate to them. He communicates to them clearly that this is the deceptive teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. that people have made up their mind to distort the truth, to discredit the work of Christ. It happened then, and it's happening now. I want you to know it's happening. It happened then, and it happened now. Now, the Pharisees was the bureaucrats. The Sadducees, all of them were religious people who had credibility in the life of their community. The worst challenge to the church is people who are credible. The worst challenge to you growing is people that you've given the right to speak into your life. They have the ability to mislead you and to give you distorted facts. That's what Jesus said, these words. Verse 12, I want to read it again. Then at last they understood that he was speaking about the yeast in bread. He wasn't speaking about the yeast in bread, but about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Their deceptive teaching. Now, verse 13 is very important because Jesus now warns them of deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, verse 13, Jesus now came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, and Jesus asked his disciples, a very pointed question. Now, these are two questions that he asked. Who do men say that the Son of Man is? He's now inquiring from the people, his team. Now, what people don't understand, that Jesus is not just talking to the 12 of his disciples, but this question was broadly circulated among the people who accept Jesus' teaching. Who do they say the Son of Man is? Now, Jesus was not inquiring this understanding, or inquiring this knowledge because he already knew. He wanted his disciples to be able to articulate. Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say John the Baptist and Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Now, Jesus asked a direct question to them, a lead-on question, which would get to a direct question. He now hooks them.